Kirk MacKinsey. We're starting this again. We're starting the recording again. Everything's working on Blog Talk Radio and Talk Show. And Kirk, again, the farmers are the first group of people that the communists go after in every communist takeover, from South Africa to Rhodesia to Russia to China. I mean, 60 million people killed in China, killed in Russia. And if they take the farmers out, and it's worse than that, Monsanto is the corporate farms is the 9th plank on the Communist Manifesto. The 7th plank is government control of agriculture. And Monsanto, not only are they producing most of our food, they're producing it as genetically modified food that rats won't eat. This is a direct attack, I think, on the people of the world.
Well, I think that I agree that there's a real problem here. Can you imagine that we're being allowed for Monsanto to go ahead and make all of food production infertile? I mean, can you imagine all of the food grains of the world, increasingly the corn, the rice, and so forth? They want to make sure everybody buys those seeds every season, so the seeds themselves and the plants they grow are infertile. They cannot themselves self-reproduce. I mean, we have the world's food production in the hands of one company. It's frightening, frankly.
And that's the same, by the way, that's the same company that gave us Agent Orange and Roundup.
Yeah, I think it's, there's a corruption here. I mean, I cannot imagine that this would have been allowed to occur. So, yeah, the world is really in, becoming dependent upon this, and it's not an acceptable situation from my perspective.
Now, these meetings that you have, Defend Rural America, you've set these up, and we've got a number of them scheduled. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick. September 27th, 2 days now, you'll be in Fresno County. On October 13th, 2012, San Luis Obispo County. October 20th, San Joaquin. Well, we're going backwards here. I'm sorry. November 3rd is Amador County. Okay, that's and October 27th, Stanislaus. I beg your pardon here. Stanislaus
right.
County and Amador are coming up.
Right, there's 5 events, and we've had the first 3, so now we have the 2 left, and so the next one is going to be this Saturday, and that's going to be in Modesto, and the one the weekend after will be in Sutter Creek.
Okay, all of those are linked on the site, and that has all your contact information and the dates. That's linked right under your name here on freeamerican.com. What kind of response? I think it's I think this is great that you're doing this, but what's your plan of action? What are you telling the people that are attending? And now in California, right there in the counties that you mentioned, I understand they've even cut off some of the water to the farmers. What's going on?
Yeah, they cut off water. That's one of the problems here. They're trying to blow up dams and cut off waters. You can't grow food. The events, the main message here is, here's some of the messages. First, we can no longer trust government at any level. That means it's really back in the hands of the people. The future of the country, and frankly, I think the future of the history of the world are going to be dependent upon what America does now. And I think what has to happen is we have to get the people who do understand there are problems and are willing to stand up and fight them to begin to form coalitions. We need to have the individuals and their group associations beginning to work together in a cooperative fashion where we have communication, coordination, and cooperation, and we have to do that against a strategy that will work. Those things have all been laid out by Defend Rural America. Then those people themselves, with those coalitions, and I'm not talking about a new organization taking over, no, it's just the existing organizations working together better. We have to have a constitutional backbone so that people have to understand really that they're right. The country belongs to the people. It doesn't belong to the federal government. And we have to exercise every constitutional protection there is, including the one called jurisdiction. It turns out the federal government simply does not own or control the national forests. And that's all been misled. So we're peeling that back. So there's a whole strategy of things. So we have to understand that, constitutional. And then once the people themselves begin to grab hold of the future destinies of their counties, then they're in a position to go ahead and elect the sheriff and the county commissioners and those people that will then do what the people want them to do, not, go take money from the federal government or state government and then sell the county away in order to get more money for their county budgets, but will actually do what's good for the people in the county and begin to assert the jurisdiction and proper authority of the county and begin to reopen up those forests, begin to start, scientifically guided management of those forests, make sure the water is protected, make sure that the energy future is ensured for each county. So there's another concept I call the self-sufficient county, where I believe each county really has to begin to plan its own future, and the people have to be part of that process. So my pitch to people is, look, you've got to get, up till now we've kind of viewed everything as a spectator sport. We tend to think, oh, okay, I'm going to elect the sheriff, and the sheriff's going to solve all the problems of these 100,000 people in this county, or, 5 supervisors. And we're going to stay in the bleachers, and we're going to try and get the right people elected, and oh my God, they told us one thing and they did another, and it happens to us again and again and again. I think we have to realize we have to get down out of the bleachers, get on the football field, and stay there, and be able to push, prod, pull, lead that team, and begin to fight back effectively with strategies and tactics that work.
The problem here, I was just reading a piece by Paul Craig Roberts about in America, and he spelled it with a K, there will never be a real debate. He said, God help them if Obama and Romney ever had to participate in a real debate about a real issue, they would be massacred. The debates revealed that not only the candidates, but also the entire country is completely tuned out to every real problem and dangerous development. For example, you never know that U.S. citizens can now be imprisoned and executed without due process. All that's required to terminate the liberty and life of American citizens by his own government is an unaccountable decision somewhere in the executive branch. So it's actually getting more dangerous. And we have a tendency to believe it can't happen here. When I talk about the Bolshevik Revolution, 60 million Russians, 10 million of them starved to death in the Ukraine, which is like starving the whole state of Kansas, But
I think that people, a large number of people are still they're on the sidelines. It's hard to understand why. They think maybe that they can, the troops are knocking on their neighbors' doors, but if they stay quiet, really quiet, and hunker down inside their homes and keep their doors locked, that they won't, they won't come knocking on their door. History is abundantly clear. When the people stand up, you have liberty, and when they get afraid or they remain on the sidelines for whatever reason, they prefer to let somebody else do it or whatever else, you have tyranny. And so I think that the remarkable thing about America, it was based upon people who would stand up. They stood up for liberty, they stood up for principles, they stood up for value, and as a result, we've had probably the most prosperous nation in the history of the human race. And that prosperity is not an accident, it's the outcome of certain principles, including among those the freedom and free choice. And we're going to lose that. And so what we're doing here with Defend Rural America is we're finding those people who are standing up in their organizations and beginning to connect them together and get them on board the same ideas, general strategies, and directions, so we have kind of a cohesive effort and begin to peel this back. And it works. I mean, it does work. And hopefully more people will come along as they begin to become more and more aware of really just what's happening that they're not hearing on TV.
Well, our press is another one of the problems. They're not really telling people what's happening. And, you know, we got this election, and frankly, from all of the information that's up on my website, from our experience with Obama, it doesn't seem that Mitt Romney is any answer at all.
Well, first off, the press is not ours. The press belongs to the New York bankers. Let's understand that. The communists, like you say, they take over control of mass media. They've done that in every country, and they use their ability to, you know, central banking as the vehicle to fund all this stuff. So it's not our press, and so what we hear really is not the truth.
It's controlled. It's why I started the Free American. It's why I started this radio show anyway. The press wasn't telling us the truth. They wanted you to believe the government had to go in and kill those 100 some odd people, 17 little children in Waco, to save them. It was for their own good. It was a psychological operation against the American people, I think, to see how much they would take, because what happened at Waco was an attack on a self-sufficient family farm. Now, after that, in this interim time period since Waco, I came up with the idea of a self-sufficient family farm. And I called it Liberty Villages. If people just worked together and grew their own food and generated their own power from the sun, the wind, compost, anything, everything that's out there. We've really come a long ways over the last 1,000 years, and we've got ways to generate that electricity. We don't need those big. We don't need to sell the top of that mountain to a Chinese company so they can come in and put windmills up there. Why not just have a windmill and a solar panel on everybody's home? Then, let's see, that might ruin the economy. That might ruin the power companies.
Well, I think that the self-sufficiency at the individual level may be hard to achieve, but I think that certain people should consider doing that. I mean, the interesting thing is kind of to remain free and have control over the cost of your life. It really does mean that you have to become energy efficient and so forth. But the other also thing to think about too, Clay, is that I think it'd be interesting to have a county decide that it wanted to go off-grid and to grab onto its resources, for example, hydropower, and begin to make own its own dams, which I think they should, and produce their own energy cost efficiently, and the energy sales would be able to finance the county government, which would make the politicians happy, and it would also provide the cheap energy required to guarantee the future of the agriculture and so forth, and provide the regulated water supplies that are so desperately needed to make sure that you've got water and in the middle of the growing season when things get hot. I think that the self-reliance is a part of the equation here. I do believe that. And maybe at this, like I say, at a county level as well.
Now, yeah, I pointed out that the whole idea for Liberty Village, the concept behind Liberty Village, could be done in small towns all across the country. This was the strength of America for 200 years. The small family farm. I was talking about the Liberty Village concept, and some woman called me up and said, well, I live in northern Florida, and we're already doing that. We live in a rural community. The farmers bring their food to farm to markets. We're putting solar up, and we're already doing that. And I said, well, that's great. That's the way, and that could be done in your block in Houston. If you lived in Houston, Austin, Chicago, Detroit, and you just went around in your one block area and talked to your neighbors and said, hey, look, would you like to take part in an experiment? We're going to turn our backyards into gardens. We're going to turn our roofs into solar collectors. You want to be a part of this? You want to work together? Oh, well, I don't have time to do a garden. Yeah, but your neighbor does. if we just work together here, we could solve this. We could solve this problem on a local level, I believe. And that strikes me, and why I like to have you on here, that's what you're doing.
Yeah, I think that I think it's interesting that, you know, the same people that argue for, you know, solar power, wind power, and all these things, which are not cost effective, they're not reliable, they're not all that great, that who argue for them, as soon as, in fact, you find somebody that actually embraces it and tries to become self-reliant on energy, then they go after them. The whole thing's kind of a fraud, if you know what I'm saying. But I think that the rural counties is where they can really do this. There are new technologies in terms of electrical generation and storage that make some of these things feasible. And, you know, we now have abundant energy resources, and those could be utilized to go ahead and do these kinds of things. So I think it will be really very interesting for counties if we get these groups to begin to come together and begin to have a common vision for the future of the county that's consistent with our values, consistent with private property rights, consistent with, you know, free will, that they can do quite a bit to begin to turn things back. But it's not easy because, and this is why the people who are not in the rural communities or don't, you know, aren't ranchers, farmers, you know, don't even know the problems exist. It really does affect everybody, and you have a relatively small amount of our population producing, who are the stewards of our land that produce all this wealth for us. And, you know, when they get constantly sued by law firms using money provided by the federal government, you know, it's a lopsided affair here. So I think it's very important that people who live more in these urban communities who aren't really fully aware of these issues, it's in their own self-interest to begin to take some time, go to the Defend Rural America website. There's a documentary video on Siskiyou County, and just stick with it, watch it, and just kind of see all the facts and the myriad issues that are involved, because I think that Siskiyou County is really kind of the canary in the coal mine. You know, because they have forests, because they have rivers and dams, and they have agriculture, and they have mining, they have all of this in a microcosm. They're under attack from every single direction. And so it's a good place for you to be able to kind of understand the story, understand the fraud, the fraudulent science that's trying to be used to destroy this community, and with it the water that is required to produce all the food that they do. Begin to be more concerned about these issues, because ultimately it does affect everyone.
It does. And in your opinion here, of course, you know, I have my own, but this looks the way this is developing, and I'd say we're going right along the lines, following along the same communist manifesto that was imposed on the Russian people. And you know, so I'm put down, I'm demonized as a conspiracy theorist, as a racist. I've been called an anti-Semite, anti-government, and my response is basically, I'm the furthest thing from anti-government out there. I'm pro-government. I just won't. The government guaranteed me by the Constitution and, of course, our Bill of Rights.
Well, that government, the Constitution doesn't guarantee anything. Unfortunately, that's, I think, what we're learning. It's a piece of paper by itself doesn't do it. If you don't have a moral government, you don't have moral representatives, you don't have a moral Republican or Democratic Party, you don't have people who believe in that, they have a different view, you know, it does not provide the protection. The only thing that ultimately protects the people are the people themselves. And what you say about Russia and China, frankly, these are true. I mean, you know, history has been rewritten in a way that's false. You know, the Tsars were strong Christian people.
Yes.
They've removed from history the fact that Russia as a country was a friend of the United States, and that they actually sent an armada of warships to the San Francisco Bay to protect us when we were weak against the English and the French. And they were a strong Christian nation. The Tsars were trying to privatize their lands, in other words, give the lands over to the people, much like we were doing with our Western expansion. And it was a race between those set of values versus the communists have a different set of values: the abolition of private property, the hatred for Christianity and all religions, frankly. And you know, that was what happened, and they did. They went after the rural Russia and destroyed it. If you want to abolish private property rights, you've got to abolish farms and ranches, because if you take a look, if you go up in a satellite, look down at the United States, it's almost all open space. It's rural. I mean, our country is 90% rural, maybe 95% rural, other than the coast, which develop around the ports and some of the inner ports like Chicago. It's a rural country. And so they want that land, they want that control, they want to control us, and so they want control of the energy, they want control of all the water, they want now to control the air, using carbon credits. I mean, can you imagine we now have to pay a tax on the air that we breathe? Somebody somewhere, in order to sell a carbon credit, saying, hey, the air belongs to me. It's just a completely fraudulent system. And it did result in the deaths of about 50 million, 60 million Russians, and likewise when communism came to China, a similar number. I once did research on this. I spent a few weeks looking at it, and as best I can tell, over 200 million people were brutally killed, murdered, via wars, via starvation, and other means during the 20th century. What they call, I think, the bloodiest century in the history of mankind. It is really the symptom of the birth of the New World Order. And I think we better understand that, because if you take a look at the way it enacts itself, things like Homeland Security, where you have real-time spying on every single American with computers and cameras and GPS and so forth, sitting there and monitoring you, tracking you, recording everything, analyzing everything, knowing where you are, where you're going, who you're talking to, what you're saying, what you're writing, what you're texting and emailing, and so forth. This is the kind of world that they envision, where there's absolutely complete, total control. And and they like to see, I think, a considerable reduction in the population. They'd like to see the abolition of religion. They want public school sounds like a good thing until you finally realize it really means state-controlled indoctrination. So I think that the rural America is really the last line of defense here. It's where we have our natural resources. It is where we have the cultural values. It is where we have people who are relatively self-reliant and will stand up. And this is a place we can organize, and it's working. We're moving forward on that plan. And if people like to join us, let me know, and we'll get you involved.
Now, I just had on J.B. Campbell, who is barred from a lot of radio stations because he says we have to fight. We have to stand up against these people. And he has seen it firsthand over in Rhodesia. He worked for the Rhodesian government to fight the terrorist, and the terrorist ended up taking over that country and pretty much wiping out almost all of the white farmers. Now, this ain't being a racist, this is just telling you the truth. This is what they did. And they're basically doing the same thing to us. They tried to do this at the start of the century, and after the Civil War with the blacks, that didn't work. That didn't work for them. But now they're bringing in the Mexicans, and they're bringing in the Muslims. And they're running them in the same way they inflamed the Jews in Russia and turned them against the white Christian Russians.
Well, there's certainly a large immigration. I mean, you can take a look, and it really is part of the strategy. You can look at Europe and how far advanced it is. It's not that the people coming in are bad people at all. It's they're pursuing their own individual thing. I think that the evil in all this is that the intent here is to basically fragment a society. It's not e pluribus unum, it's e unum pluribus, from one make many. And they therefore take away any cultural values from everybody, because it is so homogenized that there is no differences per se. They homogenize this culture, and you have no one dominant religion, you have no one dominant culture anymore. everybody loses out in their cultural values, and the only thing remaining is the culture that's being established by these central bankers. And it's not. It's part of the strategy. It's not that the people who come in are necessarily bad. They're just kind of following the money, so to speak. It's the people that are intentionally doing this and using this as a tool to destroy, Western civilization. But they've also destroyed India's civilization. They've destroyed China's civilization. They've destroyed, Japan's, Africa's. It's quite incredible, really.
It's incredible is probably a good term for it. How do we do this? How now? Let's just take. I mean, I've just been doing stories up on the internet, up on the my website, freeamerican.com, about the whole Romney campaign. I mean, Romney is Clear Channel. Bain Capital is Clear Channel, and we've got a lot of dual citizens that are working. The call them Bolsheviks, call them neocons, call them whatever you want to call them Zionists. It doesn't matter. There are people out there that want to rule, that want that work for the banksters, and that includes almost all your politicians and your lawyers out there. They're working for the Bar Association. They're working for the empire on which the sun never sets. We haven't. I don't think it's the New World Order at all, Kurt. I think it's the money changers that Jesus ran out of the temple are still with us. They just changed the name of the temple. They call it the Federal Reserve, the International Monetary Fund, or the World Bank.
We are where we were 2,000 years ago, and we have to throw the usurers out of the temple once again.
We have to do that, and it's our religions have been taken over too. I mean, if you're referring to I believe if you're referring to yourself, or you've been indoctrinated to believe you're a Judeo-Christian, then you're really saying, I'm a satanic Christian, thank you. How do we combat now? Tell me some of the speakers that you're having here. There are people that I know and I've had on this show and I've been working with a long time that like Sheriff Richard Mack, who's organizing the sheriffs, which is your one protection against the federal government. If the sheriff is a constitutional, freedom-loving sheriff, then you've got a chance in your county to keep the feds from coming in and stomping on your tomatoes.
Well, we've had some really terrific speakers. We're having, sheriff or two on each one of these panels, but it's not just sheriffs. I'm pulling together people with diverse interests because we are trying to build these coalitions. So, for example, in San Joaquin County, the event we had just last Saturday, we had Sheriff Dean Wilson come down, I don't know, an 11-hour drive, I think, from Del Norte County to talk about the issues going on up there and to provide a sheriff's perspective. We had Dr. Richard Girat come from Siskiyou County to talk about what's going on in Siskiyou County. We had Dave Pecan, a winery owner from Escalon. It was absolutely fantastic to talk about some of the details and walk you through the impact on his family of all these crazy things. We had Dante Nonmalina Jr., who's an attorney in Stockton, talking about the assault on water rights. We had a representative of Pacific Legal Foundation, Richard Fields, who came to talk about property rights, cap and trade. We had Steve Brink, who was the Vice President of California Forestry Association, talking about the destruction of our national forests. And we had Doyle Shanley coming from Apache County, Arizona, talking about federal jurisdiction. You just don't find a better set of panel than that. And so what you see here is we're talking about these problems from, forestry